My Gavanen Melonin, and well met indeed. I am Arakir Galadirthan, the head of the modding team behind Divide and Conquer, and welcome back to Divide and Conquer as we continue on with the faction overviews, and this time with Dunland, who very handily start right next to the royal town of Titharbad. I didn't want to move the camera because I thought that was so funny, but when I say it out loud, it's not really that funny. Welcome to Dunland. We are covering them, and I've got some surprises. But let's start where we always do, with the size of your domain and your initial starting army. Well, the size of your domain is almost present on the screen. There we are. Dunland, Bairig and Dunland are the only towns that you begin with. The capital is Dunland, which is always nice. The armies, as you can see, are very small. There's a minor garrison in your capital, even smaller garrison in the hills, and a simple garrison also south with the border of Isengard. So no major armies and nothing too large to start with. There's even a rebel Dunlanding captain roaming around your lands. How annoying is that? Your leader capital then, Dunland is your capital, already said that. Your leader is Chieftain Yag-Thak. And that is what he looks like.
Yes.
Splendid. Glorious, even. Your generic captain looks, as I say, like the Dunherd unit. There he is, Captain Cathalan. And a generic Dunlanding general looks like that. Now, do note that Captain Yag-Thak is not... That's not just how he looks. That is how any of your faction leader will look. So that's a faction leader, that's a general, and that's a captain. And those are your campaign strategy models. You will have noted that Huntmaster Frecha is your faction heir, and he stands down there in Dunland. Now if we go through and look at the bodyguards, Chieftain Yag-Thak comes armed with Guardians of Dunland, in the same way that the Enid Wythe faction leader comes with Guardians of Enid Wythe. They are the script unit, as we will cover in just a moment. Strong defensive spearmen. Menthar from the hills of Dunland comes with Beast Slayers, so he is an archer bodyguard. Very handy. And finally, your faction heir, Frecha, comes with Eisen Mac Axeman, which is a restricted unit, but is damn effective at killing other people, as we shall soon see. Your diplomat comes, of course, from your capital, from Wolf's Hall, the unique-ish clan-like building that you get in Dunland. Oh, you get a tannery. Oh, that's what increases your culture. Oh, that's interesting. No, that's just a totally unique building. Oh, cool. I didn't know we added that. Sorry. Anyway, Rebel expansion. You could go north. Both of the Tharbads are ripe for plunder and ripe to be yours. Of course, you can't upgrade them once you get them, but they're there, and they will eventually give you good money. Ostinethil could also be yours if you wish to beat the orcs to it, who will always tend to get it early on. And if they don't, of course, there's a script. There is a scripted chance that Imladris will get it around the 10th turn, I believe. You can also head south into Herat, in the town of Herat Shah, and... or even further and snap up Regnas before Isengard or Enid Wythe do. But of course, south you don't have many options. North are all of your options. So you're heading north. Your neighbours, of course, Enid Wythe, Isengard. The Misty Mountains do actually border you, courtesy of Bairig. Further afield, the northern Dunedain, the forces of the Breeland, and to a certain extent, Khazad-dûm if they knock on the doors of the Misty Mountains. But of those few, you are only at war with Bree, Khazad-dûm, and Rohan, who aren't even your neighbour, really. They're quite far away in all things considered. And you are allied to Isengard. No, you're not allied to Enid Wythe, and you kind of just mutually dislike each other. You don't hate each other by any means. And there's almost an equal opportunity. No, there isn't. There's more chance that they'll attack you, but there is at least a possibility that they will seek an alliance. So anything's really possible, but kind of stick with Isengard and just murder everyone is the best way when playing as Dunland. Economy, buildings, and blacksmith. Well, let me first start, as always, by telling you that if you want a garrison in any town, you need to build the armory. It will reduce the building income of that town, but it will increase the public bonus due to law, or it will increase your order due to law, and it will give you a garrison. And then there's a second tier upgrade that will then also give you more troops. However, do note, if we go to the building browser, something that people have still not seen, if you go to the building browser, it tells you what it requires. I've just pointed at the screen. It tells you what it requires. So if you can't build it, go to the building browser and just hover over it, and you'll see that there's a reason you can't build it. So you will, however, note that this requires an Arnorian Hall, which I'm afraid you don't actually get. So Dunland are restricted to only one armory. You just simply do not get the second tier. And this is in line with the fact that you are a Wildman faction. Now, if you are new to DaC entirely and you've never heard this phrase said, then what I can tell you is that the Wildmen are an odd mix between an orcish style of play and a human style of play. And what I mean by that is that they require numbers to ensure that they can survive in the late game. But in the early game, they often have sort of unique playstyles or units that put them on par with other factions, or if not even greater. There's call to suggest that in the early tier, before the barracks event, the Wildmen factions are quite powerful in the hands of a human player. Nowhere near the best nations, of course, but they are powerful. But then when you take the transition to the late game, you then need to rely on trying to get numbers out because your nation will suck. You are not very strong in the late game. None of them are. The Wildmen factions are Enedwyth, Dunland, and the Anduin. To a lesser extent, Bree as well. They're not strictly a Wildmen faction, but they follow the same kind of pattern. But anyway, there we are. So, and within this theme, the Wildmen are restricted in certain aspects. You cannot build, for example, anything higher than the castle. So you can't get the stronghold. The third tier of castle, you just can't get it. You're not stonemasons, unfortunately. You are based on essentially Celts and the like. But this does, as I say, also mean that you do get restricted, unfortunately, with your buildings. Because something else that a lot of people are going to hate, because some people really hate restrictions, is that you can't go above large town. Dunlarak is the largest town size that the Wildmen will get. And this is because, unlike the Orcs, who populate every town massively, the Wildmen are not like rabbits. And unfortunately, you don't have the population nor the know-how to create large cities. So large town is the highest town size you can go, restricting you significantly in terms of your buildings. This is the first overview where I've actually had to say that. It feels like everyone now is unrestricted. We're bowing to all of the peer pressure. I say peer. You have to be friends with them to call them peers. But anyway, sorry. So your buildings are restricted because you will not go beyond that third tier. So you've only got 3 blacksmiths because you can't get the next 2. And you would only get 3 anyway. Marketplace does go to 4. So if you're lucky enough to capture a city in a large city, you can then build the higher tier marketplaces. It's just you don't have the infrastructure or you don't have the knowledge to create the larger cities. But if you take over a larger city, you'll happily fill it with your crappy wooden architecture. No trouble. But, in terms of guilds, you only get the Fighter's Pit, which increases experience bonus. And you get the Tier 2, which gives you a global experience bonus effect. Potentially, therefore, giving you 2 extra experience upon recruitment in any town. Or in 1 in any town, 2 where a warrior's hut is present. Remember that a warrior's hut can be built in every town you own, providing you meet the requirements enough times. The warrior's hall can only be built in 1 location. And that's 1 location within your realm. There is a third tier, which is unavailable to the Wildmen, that can only be built once in the entire map. And the AI will always build that, as I often say. And finally, because I'd forgotten that we even did it, you also get the Tannery. The Tannery and the Tanner's Guild, which is something that we added to... Anduin, Enedwyth and Dunland all have one of these. I don't know why I'm so surprised. I'm pretty sure I added it. And I'm certain I used that image. So I took all of them from Anno 1404. But anyway, the Tannery is just an eco bonus. It's an economy building. It gives you an increase in tradable goods, increasing income, and a culture increase bonus. And the Tier 2 just does all those things better. Including a population growth bonus. So it is purely, as I say, it's there to counter the fact that you won't get the large tax income, you won't get certain high-tier buildings because your nation is restricted. And also it's just a little bit of flavour to try and pad out the building browser and not just have the same buildings available for every faction. So the tannery is purely unique to Dunland, and it's there for you only. So then we move on to the scripts. And this is where I'm very pleased with myself because I've actually done some research and I've written down the answers. So some of you may know that Dunland has a unique script that restricts certain units based on your faction ranking, which is this scroll here. Our overall ranking at the moment, for example, if we go to top 5 factions, you'll note we aren't in it. We are very far away from the top 5 factions in terms of overall ranking. But that ranking number is what your nation is restricted by. So, if you can get into the top 10 of all factions in the world, you unlock the ability to build ports. All of this is basically, the premise is that Dunland is a very backward nation. You are proper tribesmen living in just one tier above mud huts, and all you've really got is a hatred of Rohan. And Saruman, being basically very intelligent, has come down into the hills, stirred you up into a furore, and he said, if you can show me that you are strong on your own, then I will send in my assistance to you and help you where you have been unable to do certain things on your own. And the first thing is ports. So if you can get into the top 10, so that's 10 or above, so being 10th will unlock it, you unlock the port. If you can then bring that down to 8 or above, you unlock the Eisenmach Axemen and Eisenmach Cavalry, which are your 2 best units. If you can then get into the top 6, you unlock your Siege, Catapult and Ballista, because up until this point, those are things that you just simply cannot create. You do not have the wherewithal to create such machines of death, because you, as I say, you're based on the Celts. You don't have the Celts' warfare knowledge, I'm afraid. You've been beaten back into the hills considerably and frequently. And also the nations that you've only ever fought against, i.e. Rohan, other than when you've besieged the Hornburg, you haven't needed siege equipment really, because all of their towns are wooden also. I'm all making this up, of course, to try and counter anyone saying this is an utterly ridiculous system, but it adds some fun to Dunland. But finally, if you can get into the top 3, you will get a one-off bonus of 5,000 gold coins from Saruman, your benevolent lord. You will then get an extra £1,000 a turn. Your King's Purse bonus will increase, which is listed there. King's Purse is a fixed sum that we, the modders, set, and it's how you balance a faction's finances, because everything else is totally random or is game dependent. So your farming depends how many regions, etc, etc. But the King's Purse is fixed by us before the game starts. But anyway, you get a bonus to that, so that is a fixed 1,000 income, and you get a population boost in your 3 starting territories. Saruman sending out his, I don't know, prisoners, or making a deal with Enedwyth, those that want to come over, using the power of his voice to ensnare other wildmen who are currently not fighting for your cause. And so that is the Dunlanding script. However, there is a second script. You're script heavy. And that is, of course, Unite the Clans. And to get information on this, you need to go to Wolf's Hall. No, you don't. No, you don't. You need to go to Chieftain Yag Thak. Yes. And he has the wooden crown. The wooden crown, though simple and unassuming, once sat upon the head of the elected king of all of Enedwyth. Long before the Númenóreans came out of the east. There should be a second accent in that word. The lands of Enedwyth and Dunland were united and peace reigned. The crown has since been handed down to the Dunnish side of the clan split and now resides with the current chieftain of the Dunlendings. The crown may once again denote true power over Enedwyth should the following regions come under Dunlending control. And they are Nelchaloon, Maulfin, Chaladir, Erunvorn, the Bay of Eisen, Parthior, Cairil, Druwaithior, Maulrenaith, Saraline, Heratshire, Lugio, Hills of Dunland, Southern Dunland, and Northern Dunland. Your pronunciations may vary. But to find out then which ones are those, number 1, I personally would write those down because I'm a bit sad and I love stationery. So I would write those down and keep a note. And then if you right-click on the map, it tells you which regions are which. So you can see them all popping up there. Note, you did not need Swanfleet nor Nin in Eilf, so you do not need Tharbad to unite Enedwaith, but you do need Argond, which is an interesting one, and Bregost and Suduri, but you don't need Caras Nernaled, but you do need Erin Vaughan. So it's a line that breaks across there, but misses out Tharbad. So it's kind of Southern Matraith and Enedwaith, and you need all of them. You will, however, note again, if we just pop back to him, that Bregnas was not included in that. So you do not need Bregnas. That has been removed. And partially that was removed. You do, however, need Gund and Parthior down there. Partially Bregnas was removed because Isengard almost get it almost straight away. Or certainly when we set up the Unite the Clan script, I think Isengard even got Bregnas in the turn 1 auto expansion. And so it was almost impossible to unite without breaking your alliance and attacking Isengard. So we removed Bregnas to try and stop that. But you will have to beat them to Gund. That's the challenge. But if you unite the clans, then you unlock another building, which is a watered down version of Wolf's Hall that has various bonuses. You'll note that gives you a melee weapon bonus, and you are then able to recruit Chieftain Yagthak's bodyguard, the Guardians of Dunland, who are your absolutely hands down best and only truly elite unit. As we will see, the rest of your units fall just short of other human nations, who are the basis for DaC. The human nations are the kind of vanilla, and when I say human, I mean Gondor. So Gondor is kind of the faction that every other nation was based off of, stat-wise. So you take Gondor, and then you make everything else comparative to that. As a general rule, there are exceptions, but generally that's the case. So that's Dunland scripts, and I don't think there's anything else. No, that's pretty much it. So you'll need to get good in order to unlock better things. And that also sums up the Unite the Clan script, because as you know, most of those regions are held by Enedwaith. So you will need to attack and destroy them in order to unite the clans. Major map changes from the previous version. Heorot is new. That used to just be part of Barradvin and Alkford. I think that's it. Londangren moved up from the coast because it was crashing every time when it was on the coast, so we just moved it inland and that fixed it. I think that's the major region changes. There's 2 Tharbads now. There used to only be 1, I suppose. That's also new. Ostenethiel has a custom battle map now, which is quite a cool one as well, so fighting there's good fun. If you make it north, Anon and Orod is also, of course, new. So there's that as well. But that's the main differences in terms of the map for this region, I think. Yeah. So tips and difficulty. Again, hold my hands up and tell you that whilst I have at certain times worked on the coding behind Dunland and created various bits and pieces of their faction, I've never played as them. I would imagine that the campaign is rather stalematy against Enedwaith because you're kind of as good as each other. If you were to backstab Isengard and attack them, I expect you'd be annihilated unless you can do it in a kind of blitzkrieg fashion and just absolutely swamp them when they've got hardly any settlements and wipe them out in one turn. Otherwise, a protracted war with them, you will lose. In the north, you will fight much better against Bree than you will the northern Dunedain, but the Dunedain will be engaged with Angmar, and so you might be able to scoop up Bree without ND really knowing. If you ever get to Linden and Nerid Lewin would utterly annihilate you, so do try and stay out of war with them. Same if Khazad-dûm do break through the mountain, and if they start eyeing you up, then you're in a bit of trouble, I'm afraid. So be careful of that. Basically, everyone is better than you except Enedwaith and Bree, so kill them because you'll be able to. But there we are. That's the campaign side. Now let us jump over to the battle map and see how we get on there. Welcome then to the battle map for Dunland, and a brief overview looking at them. You'll note they have very few archers, but they do actually get some cavalry, whereas you might have thought that they would have none. Otherwise, very infantry heavy, as you can see down the middle. So before we begin, let's just say, as ever, that this break here is a rough approximation of where the barracks event might be, but it is actually just based on their stats. So the first tier of units, no matter how or when they're available, these all have similar statting grouping. Similarly, second tier all has the same stat grouping. Depending on when they're available is irrelevant. This is a rough estimation of when the barracks event is, and then again, same stat grouping. I also just wanted to mention, because I didn't cover it on the campaign side, that Dunland's units all come out of the same military building. You do not have an archery range, a barracks, and a stables. You have one building that gives you certain units at tier 1, then it gives you archers and cavalry at tier 2, and then it gives you elites at tier 3. So you have just one building, but you need a second tier of it in order to get your cavalry. So it's an interesting block to various units. But let's start at the very beginning, to quote Maria von Trapp, and start with the Clan Spearmen. So the Clan Spearmen are your basic, everywhere available spearmen. They are better than Orc trash, but they are still trash, with a poor attack of 2 and a defense of 6. Note that Dunland has generally poor morale throughout, because they've been kind of incensed to fight. They haven't gone to war because their survival depends on it. They've been enticed to go to war, and thus, whilst they may be a warrior-ish people, and they have a burning hatred of Rohan, they still are afraid of things. So their morale is poor, and their morale response is poor. Spearmen, though, do get a bonus against camels and mounts and whatnot, and they can shiltrum rather than perform a shield wall, which is sometimes useful if you've only got a few of them. They also have standing with them the Dunlending Huntsman, your first of 2 Javelin units with Dunland. Their missile attack is only 7, but with the Javelin that's always at least going to do a little bit of a punch. Javelin units are always good if you can get all of them to throw their Javelins before they fight. Poor morale again, but average morale response this time, but their defense is only 3. So once they finish with their Javelins, they have the same attack as a Spearman, but they're god-awful. I think they just wield an axe. So there's no shield, and they just pull out an axe. Very poor defense, though. They're going to die very easily. So you want to try and make sure you're using them to throw their javelins, because if you use them in melee, they're not going to do out. You also here have the Clan Axeman. Now, this unit is a little better with 3 attack and 3 charge. Again, a defense of 5. Slightly lower than the Spearman, as you'd expect. Always kind of that way. Poor morale response. This unit is designed for flanking if you have not got berserkers with you. Their attack and charge gives them that little bit of an edge, but with no armor piercing, that's still a very low attack. And they can stand in your wall. I mean, I say this unit's better for flanking, this unit's better for defending. Really, these units are so naff that it doesn't matter what you do with them. You just got to hope and hold on. But the Dunlending Berserker will at least get some good kills. With an 8 melee that is effective against armor, and they frighten nearby enemy infantry, which is rare for such an early tier unit. Their defense again is only 5, and that is only 1 in armor and no shield. So arrows will kill them easily, because arrows' defense skill is taken out when you factor archers in, which is why Gundabad, the newer faction coming soon, are going to struggle very much against archers. But anyway, the Berserkers are very good. Good morale as well, with an impetuous morale response, making them one of your best early tier units all round, to be honest. Train them when you can. You will note that the faction costs for Dunland are cheap. Not as cheap as Orcs, who are about 200, 180, but cheap. So you can get quite a few out. You have 1 archer unit supporting your early tier. Those are the Clan Hunters. There they are over there. Come forth from the hills! They have a 1 melee with only a 4 defense. So when they run out of their 3 missile damage arrows, they will die like butter melts to a hot knife. They are really quite poor. But a 3 missile for an entry-level archer is actually quite good. Because obviously, of course, archers are the silent killers. You forget that they're doing anything, and then you look at the stats at the end and realise they've killed more than anyone. Which happens to me an awful lot. But that's because I don't pay attention. But they are passable archers, poor melee. But with a 330 recruitment cost, that's alright. Their accuracy, though, is human tier low. Range of only 150, which is the smallest for archers. And only 18 missiles. I know it's a bit arbitrary, but we have to use these stats to balance certain archers. So whilst I appreciate that every archer really could have upward of probably 40 arrows, it would just totally ruin the balance. So that missile stat is edited depending on what tier they are. And finally, the first cavalry unit, the Dunlanding Horsemen. Dunlanding Horsemen are, again, average at best. No spear, so their charge is reduced. Only a 4 charge anyway. You do get the mass of the horse, but once you actually hit the enemy, certain enemies will just shrug them off. They get a bonus, interestingly, though, against horses, camels, and wargs. So they are primarily designed to stop other cavalry. That is their focus. And with a relatively high attack of 4 for this kind of unit, the low defense of 6, though. They are your defense against Rohan's early tier cavalry, if you can really call them that. But then we jump up to the units that are actually going to start really getting some kills, and we'll start with the Raiders. As you can see, there's immediately a change in aesthetic, as these people actually wear chainmail. And that's reflected in their much higher armor stat of 5, and an overall defense of 11. Their attack is 7, and their charge bonus is 3, which is quite good for a just axe and board unit, which is what they are. Average morale, impetuous morale response. They can either hold the line or attack. The choice is yours. They'll do reasonably well in either. And for 530 gold coins, they don't cost an arm and a leg as well. And they have very shiny helmets, as you will note as we scan around them there. They have standing shoulder to shoulder with them the Dunlanding War Band, who are at current a spear and shield unit in your games. They can make a shield wall with their quite nice impressive shields. Their attack is only 4, but Spearman's attack is always quite low. But their defense is up at 13, with a high shield stat in comparison to the Dunlanding Raiders. In fact, I believe that is all that separates the two. Oh no, the Raiders have a better armor stat and a lower defense, whereas they have a lower armor stat and a higher defense. So they play off against each other, but the Spearmen will defend, or the Warband, sorry, they'll defend, and the Raiders will attack. You also get then the unit that should be absolutely deadly, but I often find doesn't do very much. But maybe that's because I'm so afeared that it's going to be deadly that I range it down. I make sure I kill it. But these are the Dunherd Champions. They have a 7 melee attack that is effective against armor, and unfortunately, because that's a secondary weapon, it doesn't tell you that there. But their secondary weapon is armor piercing. Their missile attack, which is javelins, is a 9 damage, which is really good for a javelin unit. Really good. Their defense is only 8, though, which I suppose is quite poor. So in combat, they will go down. They are essentially one of the rare times that we've put a javelin on a strike infantry unit. So they're best used flanking the enemy, hitting them in the side, taking advantage of their reasonable charge, relatively high attack and armor piercing, but throwing javelins before you run into the enemy. They get 4 javelins and a 65 meter range with a high accuracy, which is actually quite good. Obviously nowhere near as good as Ennard White's javelin capabilities, but they're good. Their morale is average, impetuous morale response, so they're a good little all-round unit. Very good little all-round unit. And also I think just because they're the only one that have this, which is a kind of longer, lengthier, adapted version of a Morning Star. I don't know, what's the proper name of that? Just a mace? But then isn't a mace completely blunt? What's a spiked mace? Have I just answered that question? Is it a spiked mace? Anyway, we'll never know until someone answers. You also get the War Chanters, who are female. Get over it. But they were covered in the Ennard White video. So briefly, they're just a unit that increases your morale by standing near people and then by chanting as well. They frighten enemies as well, and when the enemy gets near, they're very aggressive. Very good unit. But very low in number, so they're very likely to be stun locked, so watch out for that. But as I say, for full in-depth, they're in the Ennard White overview. Because they're an Ennard White unit, really, that Dunland actually just have access to. I didn't mention that in the Unite the Clans, did I? And I bet there's a million comments telling me that. I'll cover that when we get to the end. You also stick with archers first. The Beast Slayers come in now.
Come forth from the hill.
Beast Slayers are a real weird little unit because they are an archer primarily, but they can hide anywhere. And then when they finish with their arrows, they have a pike. And one of the few and very unholy unions of these two weapons are the Beast Slayers. So a pike and arrow unit. Other than those, though, there's nothing too remarkable about them, except their morale is very good. You'll note that most of the units of this tier had average morale. Very good is 2 tiers above that. So they will actually fight well. They're impetuous morale response, average accuracy though, so not the most amazing archer. 170 meter range, 24 missiles, missile attack of 5, so just below rangers. They're not as good as human rangers, but they are your best archer. They're not too expensive at 620, and as I say, once they finish with their arrows, they're a formidable pike unit. With a defense of 8, which is quite good for a pike unit, and a 4 melee attack, which we can assume kind of maybe is about 12. That's a really, really, really rough estimation for thinking in your head what you're going to get from a pike unit. And as people have pointed out, the pike unit actually often takes quite a while to kill anyone, but because it survives so long and it keeps the enemy at bay for so long, that's why I would suggest upping the attack, because you'll often note pikes going up against numbers that they should not beat, and they come out with very minimal losses. So just kind of assume the attack's higher rather than... is how I always break it down in my head to make it easy. You also get the mounted warband, so the cavalry counterpart of the main spear unit at this tier. And this is the first cavalry unit that's actually going to charge and hit the enemy well. They get a spear, they have a charge of 7, an attack of 6, and a defense of 13. Mostly... and the defense is nicely shared out amongst the 3 as well, so no super weakness to anything in particular other than the fact they're cavalry, so you do not want to leave them in prolonged melee. They also get a bonus against camels, wargs, and horses. So again, your cavalry is basically designed to stop other cavalry, with both of your main cavalry units having an effective bonus against other cavalry. So that's always very nice to see, isn't it? And finally we come to your mainstream elites, Wolf's units. There are Wolf's Pikes and Wolf's Swordsmen. There's also the Eisenbach Axemen here, but as I say, they're restricted until you are in the top 8 factions worldwide. Wolf is not. So Wolf's Swordmen are your elites, but as you can see, their total defense is 17, and these are your elite units. Most nations' elite units have a defense of around 25 to 28. You are lagging significantly behind. But you do get a good attack of 8, which is quite nice. They're dependable sword and shield units and can be used as such. Either attacking the enemy or holding the line, they'll do either quite nicely. And they're not too expensive at 810 either. Standing with them are the pikes. Of course, you've been fighting Rohan since pretty much your history books began. So... you would inevitably have an elite pike unit, and that's what they are. And they are very damn good. With a 15 defense as well as the pike animation, they're up there. They're some of the better pikes in the game. Very, very useful unit. 810 again. Train these as soon and as often as you can. And then we come then to Eisenbach units, the cavalry, or raiders as they're called now, and axemen. Now, as I say, you need to be in the top 8 to train these. And at first glance you may think, oh, there's nothing particularly outstanding about them, but when you factor in the fact that they're 14 defense, which is the same, bar 1, as the swordmen and the pikemen, or 3 by the pikemen. So they've got the same defense as your elites, but with an attack of 12, that is armor piercing, and they frighten nearby enemy infantry. They're incredibly good strike infantry, incredibly good. But not only are they locked to tier 8, they are also one of the few AOR units you have. You need to train them, you can only train them from Dunland, Dunyard and Byrig. So they're restricted as well, but they only cost 900, which isn't much for the stats they give you. And they get a bonus against beasts. So not just Oliphants, but also Ents and great beasts of Gorgoroth, things like that. And the Eisenbach Raiders then are your only true answer to Rohan. With an 8 attack and an 8 charge, they will actually do quite well. With an 18 total defense as well, they've got a bit more survivability. They're just a good cavalry unit. Rohan will outclass you and outnumber you in terms of cavalry, but you do get a few cavalry options to try and hold their cavalry at bay, and the raiders are the best at that. Their secondary attack when they finish with their spear is 10 as well, which is quite high. So very good at breaking the enemy, like crushing their morale and making them run away. And then they can also do reasonably well if the enemy doesn't break immediately and they need to fight on for a bit. And then we come to the Guardians of Dunland. And this is where I'll just break and talk about the campaign again. Guardians of Dunland are only available once you've united all of Enid Wythe. But what I failed and neglected to mention is that you can also train Enid Wythe's units once you've united all of Enid Wythe. So From the unique building that becomes available, certain Enedwythian units also then come available. And Guardians of Dunland are the one that you get when you've united all of Enedwythe. And I think you actually require that to even get the other units. So the Guardians of Enedwythe are the elite unit you get for uniting Enedwythe. But you do get some other units as well. And they just kind of... They spread out and they don't clone any units. So the units you get from your clan neighbours are often there to pop or fill holes in your own roster. Now, you can only train them from a few locations, so you're never going to be able to then do everything in inverted commas. You won't have a unit for every role, but you'll just get a few additional units for things that you don't do very well. So uniting Enedwythe is very much in your interests. And also because of how good this unit is. You will note that this unit is in the same armour that Saruman outfits the guards of the Orthanc. And that is because, upon uniting all of Enedwythe, he rewards you with this fine armour and training. So these people train with the guards of the Orthanc, and they wear their armour in... because, of course, they train in that armour. And they're pretty good. An 8 attack for a spear unit's quite good. They inspire your troops, they can shield wall, and they have a defense of 26. So, as I say, the only truly elite unit. But that 26 defense is based on a 16 armor stat. That means that armor-piercing units will make absolute mincemeat of the Guardians of Dunland because their defense skill is terrible. And so if they are flanked and hit from the side, their defense, and they're being attacked by an armor-piercing unit, so let me just line that all up. If an armor-piercing unit hits them in the back, then their defense goes down to 8. Total defense of 8. The defense skill... No, sorry, it goes down to 12. Because the defense skill will factor in melee. But the shield is not affected if you're hit in the back. And the armor is halved if you're attacked by an AP. So they could potentially have only as low as 12, which is still alright, but not great. And then when you factor in that most armor-piercing units have a high attack anyway, they can be killed quite easily by them. So watch out for that, is all I'm suggesting. They require a unified Enedwythe, very good morale but not locked, good morale response, and they get a bonus against mounts because they're a spear unit. And then one of Dunland's wonderful little features is that your bodyguard is one of the best in the world, which you wouldn't think given the look of the rest of the roster. They're an axe and shield unit. There's only 78 of them. But they have a 9 attack and they're effective against armor, and that is the clincher. Very high attack, a solid charge bonus, and AP weapons. They slaughter enemy units, and often because they come into the battle normally last, or they will try and attack better units, and they can do a lot of damage, a hell of a lot of damage. Their defense is 19. Armor is 10 of that, which isn't as bad. Very good morale response, no other bonuses, and not even excellent morale. Not a single Dunlending unit has excellent morale. So morale is always a problem, which is why you have the War Chanters.
Now is our time.
They will keep your army fighting where it would break otherwise. And that is the roster. I'm not going to show you the units that you get from Enedwythe, because that takes away a little bit of the fun, doesn't it? It's enough to know that you get units from Enedwythe, and enjoy them. But I won't go into extreme detail over which units you actually get. And now we come to guess the faction. This one should be relatively easy if you saw the colour of the faction deployment area. And also because if there's one very particular unit standing in the middle of the field, which unfortunately I cannot change how it looks, that is definitely giving them away. Because there's only 2 nations, or 3 nations in the whole game that get that unit. And it is, of course, the Stewards and Kingdom of Gondor. With the only trebuchets the game has. The trebuchet looks so cool. Trebuchet memes is an absolutely cracking subreddit as well. Gondor, there's a little flavour of their roster. Some Laminan clansmen, standard militia. We've seen some Ithilien rangers running through there. Oh, what have we over here? Bodyguards, standing proud on their feet. My personally favourite Gondorian unit in terms of visuals and just how they play, the Axemen of Lasarnak. Formidable unit, and they look so good when they're upgraded. There's generic Gondor spearmen there. I will, if I think the roster is too large to do it, but I will try and show you that when you upgrade their armor, they do upgrade to look like the movie Gondorians. So don't worry about that. There's some Gondorian archers. Steady! It is cool that they have sounds for things like that, and courtesy of Battle for Middle-earth, we have the exact wording that we need. And every time they fire, they either say, "Start the barrage!" or "Let them fly!" There's Gondor's cavalry with their very cool barded horse, with the white and black regalia of Gondor. Common misconception that Gondor's colours are blue. They are not. They are white and black. Famously so. Some of their flags live on in the blue colour scheme, but black and white is very much their colour. Let fly, men, let fly! I do love Gondor. Everyone loves Gondor, let's be honest. They were, in Third Age Total War, they were the absolute fan favourite. Hands down. Often voted the most popular nation and frequently considered the most fun faction. There's an awful lot of mods based on Gondor because of that, and there is always requests to increase their army size. People always want every fief represented with 3 units rather than 1. But of course you can't give that much favouritism to one faction or everyone else suffers significantly. And they already have one of the largest rosters the game has, not including things like scripts or the Northern Dunedain, Beacon of Hope, things like that. They have an incredibly large roster. And they will make mincemeat of my Dunlanding army, even though they are outnumbered. But there we are, that's Dunland in a nutshell. And next time will be Gondor, and this is the last video for this week, even though it went up on Sunday, I think. And of course, I start my weeks on a Monday, both in my personal life and on YouTube. So I know some people think Sunday's the first day of the week, but that's just weird, isn't it? Monday's the first day of the week. But anyway, and there will be a developer diary coming next week to show, again, the next set of changes for Gundabad. I want to keep you updated with how Gundabad is progressing, because it's very useful to open them up to you to get suggestions and ideas, and we like to do that. So keep any suggestions and ideas coming, but do note, if you've seen a suggestion, do have a little read of the suggestions first. And if you see one that you like, give it a thumbs up and just add a comment saying you agree rather than typing the same comment. It just makes it easier to gauge how much interest there is in a certain feature. But otherwise, that's all. So thank you very much for watching, if indeed you have. And until we speak again, dear friends, Navar Naden Pedamad Melonin, and farewell.